I was born in 1942 here at Down. My mother had previously lost her first child, so I became an only child, which was sad for all of the family, really.
How had she lost her first child?
In childbirth. In childbirth. And there was someone else in the village at the same time, and the babies were buried at King's Nympton in the churchyard. Because I was so ill when my mother was so ill when I was born, someone came and lived to help in the house, to help look after the baby, which was me, for a few months. But then my mother soon got well again, and evenings, you see, I was with just mum and dad, and sometimes we'd play the children's games. I don't know what they were, Snap, or I nearly forget, it was many moons ago, but and I remember, yes, when I was very small, I remember going to bed with the candles. And I was always afraid of the dark when I was small, very afraid of the dark. And my grandma and granddad Stanbury would come and stay with us, because I think I'd lost my other grandma by that time, but Grandma and Grandad Stanbury lived to be well into their 90s, and they would often come and stay with us, so that was always a highlight for me.
Yes, that's me yeah, that was before I went to school.
Went to the village school at King's Nympton, and my dad would take me up to the bus some mornings in what we called a horse and butt, which was a little tiny, well, a tiny type of trailer which carried the milk churns, and dropped the milk churns at the end of the lane and went on to catch the bus at Joseph's Cross. And we'd arrive at school early, so we had to play until it was school time. And then in the afternoons, we had to wait because the bus had to come back from Chumley with the older children. So we little ones had to wait in the school playground, and we'd make our way up to we called it the top of the hill, outside the village pub.
This is what we used to call the square at King's Nympton, and became the pub, I think was the pub then. And next door, along here, just behind this fence, was the old smithy.
And some days when it was raining, we'd go and wait in the blacksmith shop with Mr. Wright, who was the smithy at the time, and it would always be very warm in there, and we often did that. You see, it wasn't only horses to ride, there were the big farm horses that had to be shod. I mean, we had 2 or 3 big cart horses here before my father bought his first tractor. And everything was done with the horses, and they had to be shod. But, you know, I think the blacksmith shop at King's Nympton was a gathering point for a lot of folk, village folk as well as us kids waiting for the bus. And I'm sure there were many, many a yarn shared in the blacksmith's shop at King's Nympton.
But that's now gone.
But it's now gone, and I think Oliver Govier, I believe he bought it and wanted to extend some of his property at the Firs, and I think he bought it, or bought some of the property anyway. I'm not sure if it was all of it. But Oliver Govier certainly bought more land than what my grandfather had when he retired to the Firs. But anyway, when the bus came, we'd be dropped off again at Joseph's Cross, and we'd walk home. And we did this, and then I don't know whether my parents thought I wasn't learning as I should have been, I'm not quite sure, or whether because I was an only child and Mum and Dad thought I would have more company, but I went off to Edgehill in Biddyford, which at the time was an all-girls school, and I boarded there for 5 years. And some of the time we hated it, but I'm still friendly with the girls and we still call ourselves the gang now. We're nearly 80-year-old and we're still the gang, and we always meet up once a year.
And you say you didn't enjoy school. What was it in particular you didn't like?
I'm a very practical person. I still am. You know, I liked sewing. I didn't really want to learn. You know, I probably ought to have had a spanking or a slap on the knuckles, I expect. But, you know, I wasn't particularly interested. I think possibly because being an only one, I'd had to toddle along behind my mother and amuse myself doing what mother was doing. I don't know if that was the reason. Perhaps it's just my excuse.
And people have talked about things like the visit of the dentist and so on. Tell me about those occasions.
I perhaps shouldn't say it, but a dentist used to visit Kingsnimpton School, and I can remember the woman shouting, "Louder, louder, louder, child." And no, not louder, wider, 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 child. And I can remember this woman shouting it. And so I always hated the dentist until after I left school. There was a lovely dentist came to South Molton, and now I'm quite happy to visit a dentist.
And some people have talked about how they had a foot-powered drill.
Yes, they did, and it was horrid. It was horrid. I hated it. I hated the noise of the drill, and I still don't like the noise of any drill, because I think it reminds me of that woman shouting, "Wider, wider, wider." I'm sure it was a good thing, but Norma hated it.
You've still got all your teeth.
I've still got my teeth, yes.
What
Most of them, I'll say, anyway.
What about the knit nurse?
Yeah, I don't remember much. I don't remember the knit nurse at Kingsnimpton, but I remember the knit nurse at boarding school. That was a ritual beginning and end of every term. But I can't remember the knit nurse at Kingsnimpton, no. I don't think I liked school, but I always wanted to be a nurse. All my life, I can remember as a child telling my father that I was going to be a nurse. And I remember now, as if it was yesterday, my father saying, "Don't be so silly, you'll never have to go out to work," he said. I suppose he was thinking I would come back on the farm, which I did. Being a dutiful daughter, I did what my parents wanted me to do. And sadly, I never became a nurse.
And tell me about Amy Luxton, because she was a mate of yours in those days.
Oh, Amy was a good friend of mine, and in the holidays were allowed to meet up. I can't remember if we'd got the telephone. I don't think we had. And we hadn't mains electricity. My father had an engine, and the first one was only 110 volts, so it wasn't very powerful. So I don't think we had the telephone, but Amy and I would get together and we'd meet up at Sampson Cross, each with our little dolls' prams, and some days I'd go to Oakquill with Amy, and sometimes she'd come across to ours here. And we were very, very good friends. I was very fond of Amy. And I did miss her when I went off to boarding school. But yes, we still live not far apart now, so we do see each other. Yes.
And what sort of games did you used to play?
Well, when I was on my own, we'd got a little bank just at the bottom of the farmyard where there was a pond, and this bank, I used to be able to stand, and it was always my shop. So if Amy came, we'd go and play shops, and I can't really remember what else we did, but we had our dolls' prams.